So okay, we're back from our break. I'm recording again,
Yeah.
and I think I made a note right here. Because I find it kind of interesting that you're talking about red, and of course how people pour hate, anger, agony, whatever, into their crystals. But it's also mainly you said like how they see the world. I think that's very, like prolific, especially when it comes to Sith. But also, kind of find it interesting because you think of purple. We've talked about Mace Windu a little bit, and how his blade is purple. And but when you look into and you kind of deconstruct the extended universe of why purple exists, it's because it is light side users that kind of use the dark side to their advantage, and specifically with Mace Windu, and I believe it's called Shatterpoint, is kind of the specific force ability that he uses, that he takes either his, he either kind of starts kind of straying into the dark side because he uses the lightsaber form of a pod, which is a lightsaber form. It's Form 7, I believe, or an iteration of Form 7, where he starts using anger and resentment as tools in his lightsaber fighting style, but he doesn't let it consume him. And I think a lot of Form 7 users are either Sith or it consumes them, so they become Sith. Later on, he doesn't let
Yeah.
his. He kind of focuses it down to use it for the good, and he kind of focuses that. But also, he takes. And I don't know how the fuck this happened because he doesn't fight Sith until Episode 3, but he learns how to take his opponent's anger and resentment and to kind of channel it through him and back at the opponent. So when he's fighting, for instance, Darth Sidious, he is using Darth Sidious's, emotions and his aggression and his attunement with the dark side back onto Darth Sidious while they're fighting.
Right.
So I don't know how the fuck he learned that because before that he didn't think Sith existed for 1,000 years. But anywho,
I just look. Okay.
so it's that combination. So sorry,
Yeah.
finishing up is the combination of what I assume he would typically be a blue lightsaber user because he is much more of a physical fighter. He's much more aggressive. He's pretty strong and he uses the Force to enhance his own physical capabilities. But he also uses that special kind of attunement with the Force to use the dark side and to use the opponent's dark side against them. That you make that red, you make that blue, and you combine it and you make purple. So that's the extended universe's explanation of why Mace Windu has a purple lightsaber. Do I buy that? No. But will I accept it? Sure. Moving on.
Right. Right. Like agreed. I have already mentioned before the impact of production, the production reasons why the lightsabers are what color they are, is like it kind of trumps basically any other theory at this point. Like the extended universe is kind of established that there's like cool things
I'm
you can
Ray.
make up after.
Ray Skywalker. All right.
We'll deal with Ray in a
I will.
second.
Yes.
We'll deal with Ray in a second. Mace Windu, as you've mentioned, post production reason for having a purple lightsaber gets all of this extra extended universe lore, this fan speculation, all this stuff, this momentum that is like quote unquote non-movie canon, right? He is who he is, but you never hear them say what his style is. You never in the movies, you never hear him say what he does with the Force in the movies.
Well,
Mace Windu.
as a side note,
Mace Windu. Well, hold on.
Okay.
Mace Windu is known outside of the movie canon as a user of this particular form of using the Force. In extended universe, there are other people that use purple lightsabers, and it isn't just Mace Windu. But as you've mentioned, if we're following this theory about how the kyber crystal is a reflection of the person when the kyber crystal is forged, or the tool is forged to see certain objectives be met with a lightsaber, and so that ends up as like this extrapolated extension of the representation of who that person is. Mace Windu uses a form that is known for being incredibly destructive and is, in extended universe canon, known to be one of the few people in all the universe who can actually control it without going full dark side.
Exactly.
Because most people that use the form do go full dark side. They just get consumed. They get consumed by it. The amount of personal control you have to make this fighting style work, to make this Force attunement style work, is relegated to like content from comics and from like extended universe references in games, I think. And don't quote me on the game bit because I'm not entirely confident in my knowledge about whether or not purple lightsabers showed up in games in canon. I'm sure somebody will politely comment saying, yes, absolutely it was. Here's the
Well,
perfect source for all of your embetterment and personal growth. But
here's where you bring
you
in
know,
Darth Revan and how he breaks all
mm,
known laws, but that's going to be a whole conversation later. But also, I think it's kind of interesting that you bring that up because also a notable user of Form 7 is Darth Maul, who hunts down and kills Jedi specifically.
right, a perfect example, right? We're talking about two people that use the exact same type of force attunement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Darth Maul, who was deliberately designed in production to look the way he did because they wanted somebody to look as intimidating, if not more intimidating, than Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
gave him a dual bladed lightsaber specifically because of, again, that production reason of wanting to be visually contrasting. And they gave him this style of wielding it that was completely different from what any other Sith or Jedi had shown before. Because of this desire to have him be so like extremely different, in a universe where this kind of incredibly different style of attuning to the Force and using lightsabers, it is canon and is like a reasonable, logical conclusion for a person to do. We see the output of what Mace Windu would look like if he failed, right? If he failed to control
Yeah.
this power. Now,
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way.
I'm gonna touch on a thing. Are you ready? This is one of my favorite things. One of my favorite talk
Oof.
about Mace
All right.
Windu.
Let's go.
Mace
Let's go.
Because you touched on this. It's weird that Mace Windu, having never fought a Sith Lord, believing a Sith haven't actually existed for 1,000 years, could just suddenly do the thing. Well, I have this theory, this running theory, that plugs into how the Kyber crystal can be a dynamic object, not just a static one. I have this theory that the Force is a benign, neutral energy. It exists, it permeates all living things. That's just how it is. We, as living beings, develop chemical responses to life. And then as we become Force attuned, it's like a computer that has certain software on it for its operating system that then gets plugged into other software being installed on it, right? When suddenly you have access to the Force, you have to see it through your operating system. And so there's this space where hate and anger and pain and suffering become the motivation. It becomes your connection to this living energy that permeates all living things. Somebody like Maul experiences the world only through this way. You covered pretty well how Savage was trained by Dooku.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually no instruction. There's nothing educational about the first part of their experience together. It was just violence, and that was all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about a being like Mace Windu, who is attuned to the Force in a way that straddles this thin line between black and white, between it must be or I am definitely gonna go overboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this emotional way, what happens when you have a Sith show up and the Sith throws lightning at you and you're like, wait, I know these feelings and I'm better at controlling these feelings than he is because he thinks controlling these feelings means being the feeling. I straddle the line and can make the feeling obey my will. Of course, he would be able to fight off Sidious and be able to withstand Sidious's power because Mace Windu is a practitioner, a successful practitioner, a master of one of the hardest forms of Force attunement that there are to participate in. One that
For a Jedi.
establishes itself. Right? We're talking about somebody who has the amount of emotional regulation internally, spiritual regulation, if you want to think of it that way, as like a spiritual connection to the Force, that's like unheard of, except for in small references in other extended universe lore where like these people suffer for having to practice this style, right? Suffer
Mm-hmm.
because of their connection and suffer and like despite their suffering have to overcome. I think that if Anakin hadn't shown up, as a consequence of Mace Windu's application of his understanding of his own internal connection to himself and the Force, I think Mace Windu is a perfect counter to Sidious. Because Sidious, being a being of largely hate and anger and greed, wouldn't be able to do anything but pour his energy into Mace Windu, who knows how to take it and to hold that energy, to hold it back, right? To literally just bar himself against it. Sidious nearly died, and if Anakin hadn't showed up, Mace Windu would have won. And I think that Mace Windu would have been the only person who would have been able to.
So there are a lot of things about this that I agree with, but some things that I kind of disagree with, only because I guess what production, as we've talked about constantly throughout this fucking podcast, what production dictates happened. Which is, what I find kind of interesting is that there was an iteration of this movie where Anakin Skywalker was there when the Jedi showed up. If you see, and you like really dissect the scenes, Darth Sidious is fighting with Anakin Skywalker's red lightsaber. If you pause, you will see not Sidious's lightsaber. You will see Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber, which I find really fucking interesting. But of course, that was cut because it really highlighted the moral ambiguity of Anakin Skywalker showing up and making the decision out of pure emotion instead of logic.
Interesting.
But the one like message that has rung true throughout every iteration, every kind of like depiction of this scene, is that George Lucas has said Sidious lost on purpose. Sidious knew that Anakin was going to show up, that he was going to warp Anakin's view of what the Jedi Council had plans for the Republic and what they were going to do to, like, Anakin's friend since he was 9 years old. Like, if you think about it, Sidious was more of a father figure than Obi-Wan Kenobi was. Like, how insane is that? When you really depict and when you really... No, like... I mean, Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi says it himself. He was like, "You were my brother, Anakin." Like, he wasn't even like, "I was your father." He was, "You were my brother." And when you really, really depict it, and this is one thing that I really want to get into at one point, is that the prequels were good. They just lacked context. Because there were 10 years of context between episode 1 and 2. There were like 4 or 5 years of context of war, of the Clone Wars between 2 and 3. So when people think that Anakin Skywalker's descent into the dark side wasn't explained or happened very quickly, they are missing 15 years of context. And I will argue that to my dying day.
No, you know what? I'm with you. I agree. I think that is a fair point to make. To be like, that's fine. There's perspectives here that exist, and to be able to say, like, people that say that the prequels weren't super great are lacking context that, like, ends up panning out over the course of the rest of the extended universe that shows what's going on in that time frame between Anakin's Jedi knighthood and graduation into masterhood.
Dude, if you watch the Clone Wars TV series, there's an episode that really hit me hard. Was when they captured Poggle the Lesser, which is like the Geonosian like general in like episode 2. There's an episode where he's like, Anakin's trying to get information out of Poggle the Lesser, and he's like not saying anything. So he fucking force chokes him and pushes him into a corner and like is crushing his esophagus and saying,
"I remember what you're talking
Tell
about.
me what you know." And that is like the first time you see the dark side in Anakin, and that is such a fucking powerful moment.
Right? Isn't it because Ahsoka was missing? Was that what it was?
I think. Why if I'm remembering correctly, it was Ahsoka and her friend Barriss, who was Liminar's apprentice, who were two, Jedi Padawan.
Right. Yes, you're right.
Were exploring something. The structure they were in collapsed, and they couldn't see anything. And so they captured the Geonosians that were like in charge of like, hey, where is this? Because they thought they were like captured or some shit. I believe that was the episode. It's a little hazy because again, I binged the entire most of the series. So while working, so a lot of this is kind of like hazy. But I believe that's what it was. Like he was trying to, good intentions. He was trying to save and protect his Padawan. But you see the dark. This is the first time you really see the dark side come out in Anakin, and that was still like 3 years before episode 3. Right. Imagine 3 years of that building up.
There's, to punctuate this further, and to further add credence to the idea that a lot of the a lot of the context that could have existed in the prequels wasn't there. That would have made things like seem a lot more clear and a lot more justified. Gendy Tartakovsky's short series is
Yes. Okay. Yes.
of the Star Wars Clone Wars, right? So like the famous creative mind behind Samurai Jack.
Fucking love Samurai Jack.
Same. He in his short series has an episode that's closer to episode 3 than I think it is episode 2, if memory serves correctly. This is post
Yeah.
Anakin becoming a recognized master. And what happens in this episode is Anakin goes off on this quest, right? So Anakin is being interviewed by the Jedi Council. And they're like, well, the Clone Wars pretty hard right now, and we need more masters. And Anakin is really bristling against us not being able to get into like the masterhood because he's not passed his test. There just hasn't been time. He just hasn't demonstrated the right character. Right, the Jedi trials. And so Obi-Wan says, hey, I'm going to make a motion. He's been tried enough. All of his service in the war is probably totally enough, right? So this episode takes place where he is going out and he's doing his Anakin Skywalker adventuring, and he ends up going through this trial that ends up representing his final trial to enter Jedi Masterdom.
Which
and there's
is the
this
trial of spirituality, which is your connection with the Force.
So, and there's this thing, right? So there's this thing that happens. For those of us playing at home who aren't aware, spoilers, go watch it. I won't do it justice. Trust me. This guy goes out and he finds a genetic experimentation plant that is taking all of the men from a local village of alien folk, and he makes it his mission to liberate the alien folk. And the entire time, there's this like narrative, this myth that the alien folk have about a being, a very powerful being, who sacrifices his hand to a devil, a weird demon, like an evil spirit, in order to gain power, but then the power consumes him, and it ends up cutting off all of this person's relationships and destroying all of his family and leaves him alone. Spoilers, you've seen Star Wars, you know who this is actually talking about at this point in the episode, but you see this, and Anakin's out there, he's undergoing this trial, this pseudo trial. It isn't intentional. They're not saying, this is your trial, Anakin, go save these people. He's just out on a Jedi mission, and he undergoes a bit of an ordeal during this trial, where as he is freeing the experimented on populace from this village, he loses his arm, his robotic arm. So like
I remember that.
He loses his arm, and as he is pursuing the scientists that were leading this lab, he captures one of them, and without his arm, without like a physical animatronic arm, he lifts that person into the air with the Force from like 100 feet away. And he doesn't just choke this guy, he crushes this guy's neck.
Yeah, and so with context,
Gendy Tartakovsky doesn't sugarcoat it. It's not like a cut off screen. You watch this guy, like Samurai Jack style, crushed metal go, and then poof, and then all this stuff comes splurting out. And this dude drops the body, turns to all the genetic experiment guys. All the genetic experiment guys are looking at him like, whoa, and they start cheering for him because they think of him as their savior. But he's got this somber, like really angry look on his face. He comes back. And he tells, there's an implication that he doesn't, there's actually no dialogue here. But he comes back and he's like, we did it, we saved everybody. Everybody's, it's like this like happy, joyous moment where they've found all of the missing men of the village. And Obi-Wan is like, yikes, man, you look like you've been through a tough time. And Anakin's like, don't worry about me, I'm a cool guy. And they don't talk about how Anakin passes his trial of spirituality after killing somebody by using the Force to break that dude's neck.
Okay, so two things of context here. One of which is this: the person, the creature that Anakin kills, is of the same species of like Wat Tambor, who looks like they need some machinery or something to kind of regulate their breathing or something. So like they've basically got like a metal machinery neck. You know, they've got like they're organic from the shoulder down, they're organic from like the nose up, but in between their mouth and their shoulders, it's like machinery. So imagine that being lifted up and crushed by the Force. Okay, like that is violent in a cartoon aimed for kids between 10 and 12. Okay,
Gendy Tartakovsky doesn't mess around, man.
oh no!
Gendy, he knows what he wants.
If you see the fucking fifth season of Samurai Jack, you know Cartoon Network fucking limited his ability, his creative potential, and then when he was just like, "I want to make season 5, I don't give a shit," he went fucking full on balls to the wall, and I fucking love it. This guy's amazing. But hold on, so
circling back.
Hold on. So the second part of this, second part of this I want to get to is in the Clone Wars, the actual, Clone Wars, there's an episode in, I think, season 4 or 5 where a well-known person of character in episode 4 is captured by the Separatists. He's a galactic, maybe like admiral or vice admiral. He's something high up, captain, but he's not all the way there. And his name is Tarkin. And he's captured by the Separatists, and General Kenobi, General Skywalker, and his Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, lead a clone force of like the 501st to go rescue these high-level, naval, Galactic Republic, whatever, from this imprisonment facility. And in that time, when they finally rescue them, they're trying to get them off planet, Anakin and Tarkin have a conversation, and they both agree very much with, Supreme Counselor Palpatine's view that war demands a lot from you, and you need to step up to end the war. They are both for extreme measures, and that really, really showcases, especially when you combine the two, that both Anakin and Tarkin are very, very much for the ends justify the means. And of course that leads to their downfall, both of them, when compared with Sidious's plot for the Republic. But it really speaks volumes when you take all these different narratives of Anakin Skywalker that you think aren't connected and you combine them to find out they are connected. It's just amazing because that really gives context. That is the context you are missing when you're watching episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Anakin's downfall.
So there's a contrast to this. There's a contrast to this that I think is an interesting opportunity to bring up now, right? So we're talking about this evolution of Anakin Skywalker. Traditionally, the blue lightsaber all the way till he becomes like evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he remakes his new lightsaber, he becomes a red lightsaber wielder, like a proper Sith Lord, right? Well, those aren't the only colors that exist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those aren't the only colors that exist. There's actually a whole host of different colors that exist. And there's even little stylistic differences between them where, like, you'll have the same outer color with a different inner color.
Yeah.
But, like, generally assuming that a lot of those are creative license from, like, third-party vendors and production choices, there's a few that I think stand out in canon, from extended universe or from movie canon, that are interesting, that I can't really speak a whole lot to, right? So we can speak a lot to how Red operates. I want to ask, right? So I want to ask, what do you know about yellow lightsabers?
Ooh, yellow. It's interesting that you brought up this one. So as we talked about with blue and green, how blue uses the Force for more physical means and green uses more for mental or emotional means, yellow actually is more of a balance between the two. And in that sense, back in the old Republic, when there were really 3 kind of career paths that a Jedi can choose, the yellow was more for the Sentinels. And that is a balance, that is an actual balance between the physical and the living Force versions of the Force, as depicted in later, or at least chronological later, iterations of the Force and of Jedi, they are more guardians of like sacred, Force relics of Force temples. And what comes to mind for me is Star Wars Rebels, when Kanan Jarrus kind of has this vision where he is dueling a bunch of Jedi Sentinels to kind of like earn the privilege from Yoda to train this Padawan. Like, this is his kind of final task to prove that he is a Jedi Master, that he knows more, that he knows enough about the Force to pass it on to someone else. And, even though that's like kind of the most relevant in my mind that you think about, when you really kind of break it down and look at other people, there's apparently extended universe of Plo Koon. Plo Koon has a yellow lightsaber at some point. He goes back to having blue, but at some point he has yellow. I don't fucking know why. You think of Ahsoka Tano after like season, I think 3 of the Clone Wars. Her second dual-wield blade is yellow, contrasted with her green, which, in my opinion, I don't know too much about. I think it's more so to have the visual contrast of her like red skin and kind of like blue and white accents of her like, I'm better phrasing, red. I don't know her species all too well. With her green lightsaber, the yellow makes a nice contrast. It makes it more visually appealing. I don't know if it has any really significance behind that. And then, of course, we talk about Rey. I don't know how much you want to get into Rey Skywalker.
No, please. Please, absolutely.
Dude,
While we're talking about lightsaber colors and the symbolism therein, I think that there's an interesting conversation to be had about the scarcity of information I've been able to find on the production side that influenced the choices made in the latest 3 movies. Because I feel like there's something to be said. Like, we know about how established extended lore treats, to an extent, certain lightsaber colors. And we know that when we were starting the latest trilogy, Disney was of the opinion that the old lore didn't mean anything. They were trying to discount it, but then they backtracked.
They were trying to create their own.
So, like, what is the significance of Rey Skywalker's lightsaber?
There, again, with everything, there is context. For instance, Luke Skywalker loses Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber, the blue one, at the end of episode 5. How does the bartender owner of episode like 7 and 8 fucking find Anakin Skywalker's blue lightsaber and it's somehow passed to Rey? I don't know, and I don't give a shit. Okay, moving on. And I looked this up too. I was actually looking up this quite a while, and I could not find anything solid about it. I don't know how Rey created her lightsaber. I don't know if there's any, actual canon reason of why she was able to build her own lightsaber and why it's yellow. I do have my theories, however. So, as we saw Luke Skywalker's progression in episodes 4, 5, and 6, we see him go from having his father's lightsaber, the blue lightsaber, and he creates his own, meaning green. And we know the significance of green is that you are studying the universe, you're studying the living force, and you're trying to fully find the balance. And I believe that Luke Skywalker is that balance. He is the embodiment of the Force in every aspect ever. And of course, Disney screws it up with 7, 8, and 9, unfortunately. But when you look at the significance of the yellow lightsaber, which is the Sentinels, which is the balance of the red, or not the red, the blue and the green, it is the balance, it is that middle ground, it is kind of the all-encompassing sides of the light side. I think that's what Rey really is. Because she, in all the flaws of 7, 8, and 9, she is learning from Luke's mistakes. You see Luke Skywalker at the end of 6 and the extended canon and even the actual movie canon of him trying to pass on the Force and teach others. I don't think that's going to happen with Rey. I think Rey's going to understand that there are many sides of the Force, there are many facets of the Force that you can't pass on and you can't just teach one aspect of. And I don't think she's going to make that mistake. I don't think she's going to try to force the teachings of the Jedi Force, which is flawed, which is inherently flawed, as we've seen in the past. And we can argue for fucking days on end. She is the guardian of the true knowledge of the Force. She is all the Jedi, but she is also all of the Sith. She's the granddaughter of Palpatine, who, again, self-proclaimed, is all of the Sith because of the rule of 2. He is all of the Sith. She is the all of the Sith, all of the Jedi. She is the balance. She is the guardian. And although there is not any canonical reason why she has the yellow lightsaber, other than the reason to kind of make her more of a notable character because she's the only movie like female Jedi really, like if you only watch the movies, you only know her as the only female Jedi. But you look at Ahsoka, and you think Ahsoka's a better written character in every fucking regard. But anyway, Rey Skywalker. I think it's what it is. I think it's the symbolism. She is the balance. She is the guardian of what the knowledge of the Force is, and I don't think she's gonna pass that on. I think she's just gonna guard it, and she's gonna be there for anyone who has questions. And she may or may not have the answer, but she's not going to force that teachings upon anyone else.
So I'm right. Like I think that there's this common thread. My perception is that there is a production decision here where they wanted something to stand out. They wanted there's this narrative
Absolutely.
that has permeated all three of the most recent movies. Or sorry, what I mean. Not
The
like
sequels.
the most. Oh, right. The Skywalker saga.
Mm-hmm.
There's this theme about the next generation moving past the last generation, letting go of all of the mistakes that the last generation has made, and trying to come up with their own way of doing things, in spite of what the old guard has left behind, trying to be better than their predecessors. I think that the production decision to make her lightsaber yellow comes from a space where they want to be clear about Rey being different. Right? Like, regardless of how she makes her lightsaber, they need a way of just saying, hey, you're a different kind. And I think that there is something, I can recall vaguely, something exists at one point where that description of the yellow lightsaber being this combination, this straddling of the line between what produces the attunement for the blue and green is like accepted. There's this thing. So there's this. Oh, sorry. I should say that there is two, but I can be pretty quick about both of them. There are two things that I think stand out to me about the narrative of Rey as a yellow lightsaber wielder. One of them stands out to me because of old extended lore. Right, so extended universe lore for the Jedi, as you'd mentioned, is that a lot of like way back when the color of the lightsaber was more your occupational symbol than it was like your spiritual resonance. Were the Jedi Sentinels, the Guardians, well, not Guardians, you know what I mean? The
Sentinels,
the guys, the Sentinels who stood watch and protected over the Order, right? So there were the Guardians of the Force, and then there were the guys who were just exclusively employed as people who guarded the Jedi Order and all their secrets and all their whatevers. These guys are like a kind of reclusive, very not so well known order of like true lawful Force wielders, and it's known that they exchange lightsabers. So they will when they gain the role, they pick up somebody else's lightsaber that was there before them, and they become that person, right? They become the role of the protector of the Jedi.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's a thing. It's somewhere out there. I don't know if like you see them in Clone Wars. You see them appear in Clone Wars because they have a special kind of lightsaber, which is like a two-handed lightsaber with a longer blade and an incredibly long hilt.
I think it's almost extensively like dual bladed. Exclusively dual bladed. Sorry.
So the thing that stands out about these folk, and not just that they like trade lightsabers, is also that there was a mention, and I had some issues. I was reading this week. I had some issues tracking down where this source came from, but I remember a long time ago finding some snippet of information about Plo Koon. Plo Koon? Plo
Mm-hmm.
Koon? Plo Koon.
Plo Koon, Koon.
Plo Koon, where he appears in the movie canon wielding a yellow lightsaber. And even though he changes lightsaber colors at some point, and I forget the timeline that he appears in, whether it was before or after his movie appearance, I'm pretty sure it was after. He does so during a time when he, as a Jedi, was performing a covert operation for the Jedi Council. He was secret, deep embedded, this snippet of information I remember reading about was that wielders of yellow lightsabers tended to be the Jedi Council's most trusted spies, where they were people who didn't just act in the order or act in the service of the Jedi Council as protectors. They were people who would invade and infiltrate enemy operations and would spy from the inside because of their mastery over the force of subtlety. Right? So now, again, all things I say speculative. Feel free to like poke holes in everything, but I recall this thing being said, and I remember like it has stuck with me forever. I can't find where that source comes from. Somebody can, please send it to me, because like I'd love to be right in this regard. But I remember this thing is that like there was the practice of guardianship. There was and that's the practice of counselorship, and there was also the practice of the subtlety of the Force, where in terms of manipulation and attunement, you possessed a heightened sense of the space around you. The Force was your sense of the world around you in a way similar to what we talked about with one's ability to learn how to see through the Force only. Only in addition to that was the ability to suppress one's impression on the Force and to distort one's ability to perceive through the Force, which is a commonly known skill in Sith practice, as as per Sidious living literally on the same planet as the Jedi Council headquarters. Like there was this extra dimension, and I've never been able to correlate the two because that was the thing is that the yellow lightsaber wasn't just protectors of the internal order. It wasn't just it was a representation of the most secretive, least known parts of what the Jedi could do, right? It was like if there was a gray area in what the Jedi were tasked with doing, these were the people that you gave the yellow lightsaber to, or the task of becoming for the organization. These were the people who had to do what they had to do because it must be done to balance the Force. And that was Plo Koon. And then at some point, he changed lightsaber colors. And I have not found anything else about why he changed.
Dude, I don't fucking know. I think they changed it because in movies like 1, 2, and 3, he had a blue lightsaber, and they didn't. And then in the extended universe, they came the canon of having a yellow lightsaber, which I am reading. I'm like actively looking up and reading things of how, people with yellow lightsabers were exceptional spies because they were able to mask their presence physically and mentally.
Right. See.
And so, that fits Plo Koon like to a T. But like, I can't find anywhere that explains why. That's why the things that I'm finding is like, yeah, he had a yellow lightsaber at one point, but in the movies he had blue. It's like, well, okay, what made that transition? It's like, oh, in the movies he had blue because I think at the time when the movies were created, it was like Samuel L. Jackson was the exception, and that was it. And then when it got to extended universe, when people started creating their own lore, they're like, okay, well, backtracking, we say the yellow lightsaber has exceptional spies, but Plo Koon was the spy master of the Jedi Order, of the Jedi Council. How can we not give him a yellow lightsaber? Okay, let's give him a yellow lightsaber before episodes 1, 2, and 3, but we'll have him transition to a blue to fit the canon so it fits in nicely and, like a fucking puzzle piece. I don't really see anything else out of that.
Like, okay, not to be too detracted from like the original point. Like, talking about Rey,
Do I have to talk about Ray?
what I was hoping to suss out from bringing this up about Plo Koon and about how the yellow lightsaber like represented this other thing in these other sources. Um, I think that there is a production decision that largely motivated the choice for Rey.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this interesting idea, right? If we look at this other alternative perspective of what the yellow lightsaber was, Rey isn't exactly what I would call a very subtle Jedi.
No.
Uh, and
Nope.
I feel like there is a level of um, similarity. There's a parody that one can draw between Rey as she is retiring, right? Rey with her yellow lightsaber as she is like reaching the end of the like the last go 6, 7, and or no, sorry, not 6, 7, and 8, 7, 8, 9.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as like she is transitioning the way that Luke had from like a blue to green. She is transitioning from her like infancy into from Jedidom into mastery. She makes a point to like look at all these perspectives of the Force, and then just say, "Cool, whatever. Maybe the thing that we need isn't green or blue or purple or red or any of this. Maybe it literally just needs people to go back to the way it was before the Jedi Order and the Sith happened, where people were just meditative. They were just contemplative. They just were,
Okay.
right? Where perhaps there's this part of her she's internalizing. She is a human, taking emotional responses to her connection to the Force, is like, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to just lay low. She's internalized as a person this subtlety. Apologies for my cat making noise. This subtlety, this quiet that comes from what a yellow lightsaber can represent. I think if we were to try to make a fan-based assessment of why Rey's lightsaber is yellow, again, putting aside the likely production driven decision, it is because the yellow lightsaber can't really be described by expressly what it means, the way the other lightsabers can, that it is so difficult to articulate what the yellow light, what Rey's motivations was. I think that they're the two same. I think that they're the two of the same things. I think that describing what the yellow lightsaber implies about the character of the person is as much describing what it isn't. Right? So I think that we know a yellow lightsaber can't stand for the same meaning as red or blue or green or purple. And we know that there are others out there, which I think would be a really fun topic to move into right after this about Ahsoka, because I think that we both agree talking about Ahsoka is probably a little more fun. I think that just like how the others can be described by like these general trends, the general trend we could try to articulate the yellow lightsaber as is of passivity and subtleness, right? Where there is contemplative in green, where there is like physicality in blue, where there's suffering in red, where there's straddling the line between good and evil, and like there's a lot of like personal self-control with purple. I think that yellow actually comes from restraint in its entirety, because you have guardians who aren't even allowed to make their own lightsabers, wear entirely masked uniforms, performing only roles that they don't decide for themselves. I think that you start looking at Plo Koon, who is being forced to do evil things for the Jedi Council in order to serve the good, restraining himself in a way that is kind of the antithesis of what the purple lightsaber implies, right? Where the purple lightsaber is this presence and this overabundance of good and evil and controlling it physically, there is a level of restraint that is what is producing the yellow lightsaber of Rey. And I think that that is why at the end of Rey's growth cycle, using a yellow lightsaber, is actually not nearly as shitty as it sounds. When you look at the movie and everybody's all up in arms and like, whoa, why? This is clearly just a production-based decision. If I were a betting man, I'd bet on the production-based decision. But if you were to go into the deeper lore, if I were to generate a fan theory, I think it's because we've described everything around what the yellow lightsaber is, such to the extent that all that is left is this idea of deliberate subdual and restraint and recession, like removing yourself from the world so that you don't have a self, but that there is only the Force. Instead of trying to bring
So
yourself into the Force, just letting yourself dissipate. Right? I think I think it is personal restraint and absence of like personal presence that the yellow lightsaber is.
all of that is a very, very interesting interpretation of yellow. I would argue personally that's what like pure green is supposed to be, as evidenced by Qui-Gon Jinn, and what kind of Yoda strived to be but never quite made it until he was in 4, 5, and 6. But it's also really, that's actually really, really interesting. I never really thought about that. I kind of like looked at Rey and was just kind of like, I don't care for you. I want Ahsoka. But one thing I want to point out, and I don't know if you know, and I might get my facts wrong because I was looking this up in kind of like in post haste, but I believe that canonically at some points, or maybe now at this point non-canonically, that yellow is actually when someone takes a red lightsaber crystal and tries to purify it. So yes, of course, back in the day, Sentinels who were the balance were yellow, but I think there's one instance that I can't think of exactly who it is, took a red, like a Sith lightsaber, and tried to purify it with like green, for instance, and it ended up being yellow. And so my personal theory that yes, I think that's a balance, but I think in top of it trying to be a balance of what the Sentinels were supposed to be, which was the balance of everything that was the Force, was that she took Kylo Ren's lightsaber because she didn't have her own. In 4 and 5, she had Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. She used that. That's why it was blue, because she didn't create her own. By the time she gets to the end of 9, I almost said 6, at the end of 9, she finally creates her own lightsaber, and that's after Kylo Ren dies, Ben Solo dies. And I think she takes his lightsaber, she tries to purify it, it turns yellow, and that's why she has a yellow lightsaber at the end. Because like
So
even though there's some like deleted scenes, or there's like some scenes that if you look too like really deep into, you can kind of see her constructing her lightsaber, like leading up to the end of Episode 9. You don't really ever see it like ignited, and you don't see the color. And I think because of her strong connection with, I mean, she was a fucking Vergence in combination with Kylo Ren. She wasn't a Vergence by herself like Anakin Skywalker does. She was a duality that was one side of a coin, the other side was Kylo Ren. And so I think she took his crystal. She attempts to purify it, which no longer made it like this, like that staticky electric, lightsaber. That's like the only one we've ever seen was Kylo Ren, because he had such raw emotion put into it. And that's why it was like basically an impure lightsaber, regardless of what the crystal was. She took that crystal, she attempted to purify it on the light side, or at least in the balance of being part light and part dark side, that it eventually created that yellow hue, and she accepted that.
So I've heard too, right, in my researching, I've heard too that the yellow lightsaber actually comes from a person who tries to redeem a red crystal that has been forced to bleed, right?
Great,
And
I'm not wrong.
I think that makes sense. I think there's like a valid theory behind that, because the idea being that if there was a red lightsaber and a person were to try to redeem it, it's a pretty good representation of a person who's gone into a darker phase and has tried to come back but is changed and is irreparably changed. And I think that theory matches the overarching narrative in like a referential way to how the relationship between Rey and Kylo Ren plays out, right? Where like she is continually trying to reaffirm that Kylo still has good in him, and he will not believe it. And eventually, rather than being able to fully redeem himself, like he has his redemption moment, but dies. Spoilers. And he, I mean, Rey is left. Rey is left over, and so maybe Rey's like, cool. Well, this yellow lightsaber is a symbol of the relationship I had, not like the romantic relationship, the like force attuned relationship that I had with Kylo, and now because this this is his stuff, I'm gonna try to do this thing, and it doesn't work because it didn't work with Kylo. Kylo may have demonstrated that he still had good in him, but it didn't work because he died and couldn't exactly finish the process of like being a good person. So I think that there's like a parallel there that can certainly be drawn. The thing I want to put out here, this isn't a counter argument, right? So the reason that I've actually shied away from that theory is that Kylo Ren's lightsaber is incredibly unstable. And what we've seen in extended fiction is
Yep.
that unstable lightsabers that are made with, unstable lightsabers usually come from people that use synthetic crystals, synthetic kyber crystals, or alternative crystal forms. What usually ends up happening is that these lightsabers that look like Kylo's, like this very customized one, this very like unique, different one that he has,
Mm-hmm.
are unstable because they're not made out of pure kyber crystal. They're not like their core. They're like focus, and so there's nothing to attune to, right? It's just like a gimmick. It's just like a replica, you know. And
Yeah.
so, I have always been of the opinion that Kylo Ren's lightsaber is unstable and kind of wonky the way that it is because it's synthetic. I've always been of the opinion that the unspoken assumption here is that he has a synthetic lightsaber he's made from all his own stuff because he was never, he didn't like get actual kyber. He had to go make do, right? Like this whole thing, the fallout with Luke happened. He ran away and he had to get a lightsaber somehow, and so he was adopted, and I think he made it himself.
He killed all the younglings.
That doesn't change. That's like could still mean in some capacity that the yellow lightsaber Rey has is some combination of Kylo's equipment and whatever. And even if you look at the art direction, you pop open Google and you look at a couple images of Ren's finishing lightsaber, the yellow one, and you look at Kylo's lightsaber, and like the scenes that you get like really good clear shots of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's some referential design choices, but I'm gonna again default a little bit to this assumption of mine that that's more of a production-based decision than anything else, which means that kind of leaves right the space where there's like two prevalent theories in my mind of how the yellow lightsaber happens, and that it is either created that way because of what I mentioned before is like my headcanon, or it's this other headcanon of the conversion, the attempt conversion that isn't fully completed.
Okay. I'm going to argue on actually multiple points on that. Specifically because like the first point that I want to kind of hit in the main point is Kylo isn't Jedi and he is not Sith. He is pure raw emotion and he doesn't know how to channel it. And I think that's why his lightsaber comes out the way he does. Because again, as you talk about, he was a disciple of Luke Skywalker, his uncle, and when he was in his mind betrayed, and depending on how you argue, it was betrayed by Luke Skywalker. He didn't know what to do with this, and he was a puppet of Palpatine. But Palpatine, through Snoke, didn't make him a Sith, and so he isn't as refined. Because you think about other Sith, because I think all current Sith except like the only Sith that had actual kyber crystals back in the day were Old Republic. Do you think of Darth Vader? You think of basically Lord Tyrannus, Count Dooku, you think of Sidious, you think of Darth Maul, all of them had synthetic crystals. None of them had pure kyber crystals. And that really puts into perspective of it doesn't make Kylo Ren's lightsaber as unique as you kind of think it is at first, but you think about how he doesn't have focus. He doesn't have that, narrowing of emotion that I mean, again, as Sidious has specifically said to Anakin that the rage gives him focus, he's just pure, unadulterated emotion, and that's how it comes out in his lightsaber. And so I don't think that specifically having a synthetic crystal makes his lightsaber that way. I think it's because he's stuck between that weird Jedi and Sith, position where he is part of the dark side, but he's not quite Sith, but he also has a little bit of light in him, but he wasn't fully trained as a Jedi, that his lightsaber comes out that way. So that's kind of like what I'm arguing there. As far as Rey goes, I do think that she took his crystal and made something of it. But you think about and you look at and you dissect her handle, her grip of her lightsaber. It's part of her quarterstaff that she had in Episode 4 that she used to defend herself with. And I think she took that because she knew that her origin, she was someone who, came from nothing, and she acknowledges that she came from nothing, but also carries that with her. When you think about Episode 2, when Anakin Skywalker loses his lightsaber when he's chasing can't think of the bounty hunter. Like, it's not Jango Fett, but it's the bounty hunter. Is it Sam Vessel? Fuck, it's so close to that.
Wait, are you talking about the guy that has the super big hat?
The changeling, the female changeling.
Oh, right, her.
At the beginning,
right.
yeah. And he loses his lightsaber, and Obi-Wan Kenobi picks it up, and they meet at the bar, and he's like, I think she's in there. And he goes, this is your weapon. This is your life. It's such an accurate, like, reflection of a Jedi's life. Because it's not where they are, it's where they came from. And I think that's a huge representation of what the lightsaber as a whole comes from. I think that's why Kylo Ren looks the way he does, because he came from a place of pure emotion, that he felt betrayed, that he has so many confusing and contradictory emotions and thoughts that are just continually battling each other. I don't believe any of this shit because I think he's a fucking poorly written character. But when you take what you have and you have to make something of it, I think that's the best theory coming from it.
Right, like in a universe, in an extended lore, production decisions aside, where again we're assuming that all these decisions that we're shown as viewers are made because the people that were making them, to the best of their knowledge, are doing the smartest possible thing. Period.
Or calculated, or continuity.
I think it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to propose the idea as well, right? Excuse me. Now, I'm looking at our time. I know that we've been talking for a little bit. If now is a break time, we could take a break right now. I feel like there is a lot to be said about everyone's favorite character, who we don't even really need to be named. But I'm also not super convinced that there's a whole lot to really say about the lightsaber deal there, because there's a lot of untouched, unexplained components of how Ahsoka got like a yellow lightsaber for a bit, about how she later transitioned into the silver lightsaber as a...
Excuse me, that is a white lightsaber.
It's you know what, when I dare you to go look at get two crayons.
I'm looking at a picture. Hold on. No. I'm looking at a picture right now of Ahsoka in Rebels.
Look at the inside of Luke Skywalker's original lightsaber from the original episode 4, 5, and 6. It's bright, okay? It's a glowing object. At some point, to show it's a big glowing hot thing, it's gonna look white. All I'm saying, I don't know that there's a whole lot to really be said about that stuff, because there's not a whole lot that's like really answered about her thing. Other than that, unless I'm mistaken, and again we can talk about this after we take a break. She successfully heals a pair of red crystal lightsabers. Right now, is that established canon? I have not seen Rebels.
Okay, so I think you are correct in that it is a break time, because we go for an hour, take a break. It's been basically another hour. Go ahead and take a break. We will absolutely get into this because I have much to say about this, and I've got at least something to back me up with. Again, it's one of those times where like the extended universe is kind of convoluted and has its own answer that people kind of accept, but it's not adopted into the actual canon of the series. So who's to say? But we've got much talked about. We've only got like we basically have 2 lightsaber colors left, and I think we can get into this after the break.
Okay.